and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 173, and today's date is September 26, 2013, and the title of this episode is Osama bin Laden is out and the White Widow is in, the new face of terror. And we understand the U.S. put out a global terror advisory alert, letting everyone know in certain areas of the world like Africa, Europe, and the U.S., there could be some type of terrorism acts going on there. And we saw what happened in Kenya, and they're just, using these scare tactics, letting everyone know, keeping the propaganda up that Al-Qaeda is after us, but we really know who is doing this and for what purpose. And we will discuss a little bit later about terrorism, what I think is going to happen, and why all of this was happening in Kenya. But let's get into the economic collapse news and what we're seeing now. We're going to go out to Cyprus, and what we've seen in Cyprus, we've seen them do bail-ins, and we're seeing this happen now in other countries and other banks where they're starting the bail-in process, and in everywhere else, when things start to really crumble apart, we will see more bail-ins everywhere. But in Cyprus, and this shouldn't come as a surprise to everyone, that the private sector deposits fell by another 2.1%, and people are just not putting, their money into the banks. Actually, what's happening is many are withdrawing their money from the banks. So, with a bail-in, how can this country get back on its feet when people are going in and taking out their money, and nobody is going in and putting in their money? Because guess what? Once you do the bail-ins, trust is gone. And I don't believe that these people understand that if you start taking people's money out of the bank, or freezing it, or replacing it with worthless stock from the bank, people are not going to open up accounts and put money in there. Why in the world would anyone do that? The first thing that people are going to do is try to get their money out. And this is why, from the beginning, when they said, oh, capital controls, it's only going to be for 2 weeks, and now these capital controls are still in effect, and they're not removing them until 2014. And they're saying around January or February, around that time period, but we will see, because you know what's going to happen. As soon as they say, okay, you have full access to your money, guess what people are going to do? They're going to run to the bank and take out as much as they possibly can. Hey, I would do it. Now, we know that Greece is having a huge amount of problems. They're in a huge amount of debt. They are in double-digit unemployment. People are not doing well. They're laying off 25,000 more people from the public sector so they can bring on more debt. And now what is happening is that the people are rising up and they want the government out. And this goes on to say the Greek government authorities are on alert after a union of Greek army reservists of special forces issued a statement urging the Greek administration to step down and make way for a national unity government. And they have a couple of demands: immediate resignation of government. They want the suspension further tax for family income up to 25,000 euro, suspension auctions and bank claims until the completion of the audit of the banks, and they are looking at this, and they have roughly around 15 different demands. And this is what happens when you push the people and you keep suppressing them, giving them nothing. They are poor, they are hungry, and this has been the same thing that's happened over and over in history. When you keep pushing people down, they eventually rise up and they will remove the existing government. And we've seen this happen time and time again. Now, here in the U.S., looks like the GDP declines by 2.48%. It misses its expectations. They were expecting around 2.6, and they revised it, and they said, oh no, 2.52, but it came in at 2.48%. And we have to realize that this is a complete recalculation. These are all made up numbers anyhow. So really, at this point, it doesn't really matter because they are manipulating unemployment, inflation, GDP, to make it look like the economy is getting better. And they always come up, oh, it's a slight miss, a slight this, and it's all becoming an illusion that the Fed is the market. The Fed is pretty much everything, and they can adjust anything any way they want to make the economy look any way they want. But the truth is, numbers can only tell a certain story, and a lot of the times the numbers they're putting out don't even make sense. For example, I discussed yesterday that they said, the wealth of the American people has increased by like 1.3 trillion. And, you had to look at this and get through all the crap, and you see that it's, stocks, which is the stock market going up, and the housing bubble, the prices of homes. But the savings, the amount of income that you bring in, had nothing to do with this. So that was all a complete illusion made up by the Fed. And what happens when housing and the prices of houses drop and the stock market crashes? Everyone's wealth just disappears. So it's all on paper. It is absolutely meaningless. And what I said yesterday, here is another example. Food stamps are a typical measure of household economic stability, and the enrollment in the program jumped up by 211,000 people in the second quarter, despite household wealth increases of 1.3 trillion. Now that's kind of odd. Now here's another statistic. For every 2 Americans added, I'm sorry, let me repeat that. For every 1 person that the administration gets a job for, 2 Americans have been added to food stamps. This is what we're looking at right now. So every time the administration adds someone to the job market, 2 people go on food stamps. So how could possibly this be? How could this be getting better? It is totally impossible. And then with the amount of layoffs, we understand that the mortgage industry, Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan, laying off thousands of people. American Express now, another 300. The Telstra Corp, 1,100. Crown Holdings, 300. Cardell Cabinetry, 903 layoffs due to closing. These are the people that make cabinets. If the housing market is doing so well, why are we seeing home furnishing, gardening, cabinetry, and furniture makers all reducing the amount of people going bankrupt? Why is this happening? J.P. Morgan Chase, another 440 in Central Ohio. We are seeing layoffs like there's no tomorrow. Meredith Whitney said, come this fall winter, Wall Street will be laying off around 100,000 people. What kind of recovery can it possibly be with people who do not have work? They do not count the people who fall off. They count the people who have part-time as having a job. But if you come from a job that's, say, making 80 grand, and now you're making 30,000 at one job and 20,000 at another job, guess what? You're still not making ends meet. You have 2 jobs now compared to the one that you had before. And even the people that came from a job that was making, 80 or 60 or 100,000, the amount of income that that job pays now is less than what the person had before. And we're seeing this happen all over the place. Now, U.S. housing, guess what? The recovery is losing steam. The plunge of the decline of mortgage applications are now starting to take effect with sales. Contracts to purchase previously owned U.S. homes fell for the 3rd straight month in August, and the The National Association of Realtors said on Thursday its pending home sales index, based on contracts signed last month, decreased by 1.6%. We are now seeing that the housing market is starting to um, actually go the other way following the decline of mortgage applications. And we can see right now that most of the homes that are being purchased are all in cash from outside investors from outside the country and from investors inside the country. But guess what they're doing? They are trying to unload their properties at this time. Why? Because they realize the housing market is ready to decline. That's why JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo, 1-800 East Coast Mortgage are laying off thousands of people. If the housing industry was doing so well, people would be going for mortgages. If people are going for mortgages, you have incredible business. If you have incredible business, you hire people to handle this huge housing boom. But guess what's happening? They're getting rid of all these thousands of people because there is no housing boom. It was an illusion. It was a pump up, and now we're seeing the decline of housing. And what we're seeing now is the Federal Housing Administration needs a bailout from the Treasury Department of about $1 to $1.5 billion to plug a budget shortfall. And they're blaming this all on um, the FHA's reverse mortgage program. Many seniors who have received the loans in a lump sum were later unable to pay taxes and insurance, resulting in a wave of defaults. And we have to remember that the Fed is continually buying the toxic real estate from all the banks at 40 to 45 billion, plus buying treasury bonds at 40 to 45 billion, which is a total of around $85 billion every single month. And they haven't let up. They will not start tapering because they realize we have all of this toxic real estate, all of these foreclosures that they're not releasing to the public, that they're keeping hidden, so the housing market does not collapse. And they're trying to pump this up with prices again and make them go sky high so people believe that this is getting better. But guess what? Nobody has the money to buy homes. There is a disconnect between their thinking and what the real economy is. You have to remember, if they're buying all of this toxic real estate, these people don't have credit to buy homes. If the unemployment and underemployment is really 23 to 24%, nobody has the money to buy these homes. You don't have the credit, you don't have the money, you don't have the savings for a down deposit. Mortgage rates are going up. It pushes a lot of people out of the market. This is the big problem. And they're doing everything they possibly can to manipulate the market to make people believe. That's all they're doing. Now, we can see our government officials are completely out of touch of what is really going on. Now, we know they're trying to push Obamacare through, and the Republicans and Democrats, they're all fighting over this debt ceiling, and they want Obamacare defunded in the bill, and the Democrats don't want that, or they're not going to get. This is all a show. I mean, they're going to pass an emergency Band-Aid fix to let the government continually operate. They'll push it down the line, maybe to November to December. They'll do it again after that, and the debt ceiling will be raised. It was raised 14 times before. This is the 15th time, and they know they have to no matter what. This is a huge show that they do. Obama was out there pushing Obamacare, and he was saying that there's no evidence that employers are cutting hours because of Obamacare, but no evidence. Well, I don't know how he collects evidence, but Forever 21 cutting their hours so they don't have to give health insurance. Home Depot, same thing. Walmart, same thing. I mean, it, all these huge companies are all doing it. Even small businesses that I know, people, they are cutting the people's hours because they say they just can't afford to pay for all this insurance. It just will not work. So I don't know where he's getting his information. Maybe from, the Fed, who's manipulating all the other numbers. But, he's a little confused. And here we have Pelosi out there sitting there and saying, well, this is a blessing that, those people who are getting their hours cut, now they have free time to follow their passions and to do what they really want. So you mean the guy that's making, $14 an hour, working 40 hours a week, now only working 20 hours a week, who can't pay his rent, cannot pay his electric, cannot, pay any of his bills, he should be happy that he can, or he or she can go and take up painting or, whatever other passion they have. It is the most ridiculous thing that these government officials come out with, and I don't know if they think we're just that stupid or they are really completely out of touch of what's really going on, or they're really just start believing their BS that they're spewing out there. Now, Dianne Feinstein, I just want to bring this back up. We know that she's pushing the bill that defines who's a journalist and who's not a journalist. But this goes further than who's a journalist, who's not journalist, and they have many different qualifications of who should be a journalist. But this also affects people who want to comment, like on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. And this goes on to say that if you choose to share an opinion in the comments section on a website like Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, you fall outside the constitutional protections of the First Amendment, according to Dianne Feinstein. If you are critical of the government or big business interest, you are not going to be protected by the Shield Law. And if you're not capable of forming an opinion or citing an appropriate reference for your argument, you will have problems. And they're trying to get rid of, and this is what they're trying to do overall. They are trying to get rid of the alternative media. They are trying to regain control of the corporate media and what news stories people see. And I've said this in the past in my other reports. What they're trying to do is they need the control of the money creation, which they have. They need to control weapons to the American people, and they need to control the flow of information. And this is why this is coming out. They really want to do away with the internet because it is the Wild West. They can't control it. There's nothing there that they control. And this is why they're coming up with the CISPA bill. This is why Dianne Feinstein is writing a counterpart to the CISPA bill. This is why it's all pending in the Senate, because they want to get rid and control the flow of information, because they understand when the collapse comes, and before the collapse, they need control of the people, and they need the control of feeding them propaganda. And now that there is the internet, they are losing this control because people are moving away from the corporate media and listening to other people that have something else to say besides what they want, besides what the government wants them to hear. And this is what is happening. Because we've seen Bloomberg and other Harvard lawyers say that the Constitution is old-fashioned. Maybe we should start thinking about getting rid of it. And this is the only thing that protects we the people. And this could never, ever go away, because these rights are not a privilege. We are born with these rights, and they cannot be taken away. That is the whole purpose of the Constitution. Plus, it is a contract to the government officials. If you do not abide by these laws that we set for you, you are removed and fired from your job. This is the way it works. We, the people, have spoken. Now, moving on, the Russians now say that the sarin gas that was used in Syria was homemade. And Russia has evidence to assert that homemade sarin was used on August 21st in a chemical attack near Damascus. The same type, but in higher concentration than in an Aleppo incident earlier this year. And right now they have the UN Security Council in Syria. Russia and Syria invited them back in to inspect the area, just like they invited them in on August 21st to inspect that Assad was not using chemical weapons. And here they are back again to prove that it was not Assad who used them. Even though the U.S., Israel, UK, France are all saying, yes, it was Assad, and they have no real evidence to produce that he actually used them. Now, Russia is going to guard the Syria chemical sites, and as the UN inspectors resume their mission, Russian minister says chemical weapons should be destroyed on Syrian territory, not moved to Russia or to any other country. And Russia is ready to help safeguard Syria chemical weapons and destroy the Assad stockpile, but will not ship any of the weapons any other place. And they just wanted to make that clear. And it looks like that U.S., Syria, and Russia are coming to some type of agreement right now, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Now, Russia and China are holding large-scale war games right now, and Pentagon intelligence agencies are closely watching Russia and Chinese and watching the war games. And NATO is also set to have military war games, large-scale maneuvers in November because they are very concerned about the westward movements of the Russian military. What they're seeing is that the Russians are moving closer to Europe, and that is troubling, an unknown military source said. And this is why they're taking and moving, having more NATO drills, and Russia's having drills, but we know what this is for. We know what is coming. Eventually, the central bankers, the U.S. government, Israel, all the private Western central banker countries need to get the war started because they understand that this debt level, these countries are starting to collapse. And we see in Greece now, they took them to a point where the people just had it. They're like, we're done with this. And this is how revolutions start. They start peacefully. They ask the government to step down and to be removed, but you know what happens. Government never wants to step down, and this is when things go wrong. And we are going to see this happen in many different countries. When people are pushed to a certain point, this is what happens. Now, there is a report that there are now hacker mercenaries. Just like the paid mercenaries in Syria, where the CIA, the U.S. government, is paying these people to start a civil war, and they're calling them, the Syrian Free Army, and 95% of them aren't even Syrian, but this is a paid mercenary group. Now there are paid mercenary hackers that will do any type of hacking for any country, which allows that country not to be implicated in a cyber attack. And it's almost like the paid mercenaries in Syria, which they are not, in the beginning, they were not brought back to the U.S., and the U.S., it didn't look like the U.S. was actually funding and creating this armed force to overthrow Assad. So they're doing the same thing with the hacker mercenaries. Now, there were additional glitches today in the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, and it looks like trading was halted at 9:44 a.m., and we're seeing many of these different type of glitches, especially in NASDAQ. And again, we have a 1,000 bank cyber drill coming up in October. We have a power grid drill coming up in November. And it looks like they might be preparing or doing something because these glitches just started about a month ago. Up until this point, everything's been fine. So it's either they're implementing or putting something into the systems and they're seeing these weird glitches that are appearing, but something is definitely going wrong. And we see that the nationwide customers were blocked from their accounts, and when people went, and this is in the UK, when people actually went to see their account online, their balances were reading zero. So we're seeing a lot of strange things happen here in the U.S., out in Europe and UK, and it's very, very strange. And there was another cyber attack that hit LexisNexis, Alt Equity, and Dun and Bradstreet Corp, and they were hit by cyber attacks, and a lot of information were breached. And an FBI spokesman said the Bureau was investigating the breaches, but declined to elaborate what was really happening at these places. Now, there is a warning now that a cyber attack threat from a resistant hacker group called the Gaza Strip has threatened Israel and said this Saturday they're going to hit the country with a cyber attack, and we will have to see how that plays out. And the group threatened Israel with a Black Saturday, stressing that it will document its hacking processes and hit Israel. And we'll have to see if this is a beginning of a false type of flag that is going on right now. Now, Interpol is out there saying that they've issued an alert for the White Widow because Osama bin Laden is out now. He is no longer the face of terror. The White Widow woman who's from the UK is now the new terror of the new face of terror and terrorism, because what happened in Kenya, and she is believed to be the person that was heading up what was going on there. Now, as we understand, a huge weapon cache was stolen in Libya, and now it's confirmed that it is in the hands of Al-Qaeda, and that was a lot of pistols, a lot of rifles, a lot of night scopes, a lot of armored tanks, and a lot of equipment just slipped out of the hands of the U.S. and now is in the hands of Al-Qaeda. Gee, does this look like something's being set up? And we understand that, there's a global terrorism alert for the American citizens. And this went on to say potential targets include residential areas, business offices, hotels, clubs, restaurants, places of worship, schools, public areas, shopping malls, and other tourist destinations, both in the United States and abroad where U.S. citizens gather in large numbers. Attacks may include assassinations, suicide operations, kidnappings, hijackings, and bombings. So, they've gotten this from credible information to indicate terrorist groups sought to attack U.S. interests in Lebanon, Iraq, Algeria, Libya, and Saudi Arabia, and Yemen. And they have specific information that something is coming. Now, we know that there was a false flag type of event in Kenya. And, we're looking at that. They have an incredible amount of natural resources there. And most of the African states like Niger, Mali, all rich with uranium, gold, oil. Kenya has oil, uranium, and gold, and bauxite. But we see, that's Guinea has bauxite. But we see all these African nations are rich with natural resources. But what interests me, and this is very interesting, in my other reports, I talked about how the U.S. was out there forcing the U.S. dollar on all the different Middle East nations and keeping control with force. They have to sell their natural resources using the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. In the meantime, Russia and China are out there making deals, having people have other countries bypass the U.S. dollar and use the yuan instead of the U.S. dollar, and they're making these deals with, Brazil, India, Australia, Iran, North Korea, and they're making deals all over the place, and they're even making deals in the African nations. And it just so happens that this terrorist attack, where the U.S. said they are right now looking at strategic strike zones and might drone attack in Kenya, and this all is coming into it's all painting a picture now of what is really going on. Kenya wants to host a clearinghouse for China's yuan currency. This is a bold African first that would deepen the continent's ties with Beijing. So what we're seeing here is they want to be the clearinghouse for the yuan, which is supposedly going to be the next reserve currency of the world. And we can see why the private Western central banks do not want this to happen, because this is another nail in the coffin for the dollar. China is now setting up a clearinghouse outside of China, and this clearinghouse would cut the need for dollar settlements. And we can see what is happening now. The central bankers are trying to stop, the U.S. government, central bankers, Israel, UK, anyone with a private Western central bank, are trying to stop this from happening. And this is why they will not stop with wars. They are going to continue and really push this forward. And like I said this before, the only way to get these wars started is to bring this home to the U.S., to Europe, or the UK. Because just like the UK and in France and in the United States, nobody wanted war. The Congress didn't want war. The UK Parliament voted down war, said no way. And again, I say this again, if the U.S. had so much evidence that was, undeniably proven that Assad did it, they would have given this to the UK to present, to vote on. But guess what? They don't have any evidence, and that's why it was voted down. But you can see they need to bring this terrorist attack to anyone or any of these places to get a war started. And most likely it might be something in Europe, and then maybe something in UK, and then the big one in the US, because the US has the military forces already stationed, ready to go in that area. They've already been making the case that the Syrian Electronic Army and Al-Qasim might combine forces, that Al-Qaeda is getting their hands on Syrian type of gas or chemical weapons, or trying to develop it. Iran they keep saying that they're developing a nuclear weapon, and they've been saying this for over 25 years, but they never come up with any type of nuclear weapon. But they are building the case, and we can see that Al-Qaeda is now separating from the Syrian moderate army and moving off to become the terrorist group again. And they are definitely making the case. The government officials are telling us that attacks could be coming here to the U.S., that there are lone wolf groups. They can't keep track of them, and now we have this global terrorist advisory, and they don't know where the next attack will be. And this is why they put this up, because all hell is going to break loose soon. And we understand there are a lot of drills, a lot of things coming up in October, November, leading into early winter, and we can see how this might play out. Again, when they did this in August about a global terrorist alert, and they locked down the Middle East, that's when the chemical weapons attack false flag happened. This is when the ships were moved in, and war was almost started at this point. Here they are again, going to they're going to do the same thing. And again, they've been talking about that these groups are broken off into many different factions that they can't keep track of, which are lone wolf groups. So we might see something like 9/11 again, where they attack, could be an explosion in Manhattan, or just a cyber attack in Manhattan, which will help collapse the system and allow the Fed and the U.S. government to increase printing to help out the situation. We might see an explosion up in Chicago or L.A. or anywhere else in the country, and or D.C. in that area specifically, because FEMA Region 3 has been purchasing a lot of supplies. There's been a warning from a senator. We have on October 17th the Great Earthquake Drill that is being held, and that is also in line with FEMA Region 3 and FEMA Region 4 in that area, where all the schools participate and all the kids. So if we do see some type of nuclear or some type of explosion or something happening in that area, we can see why this fits in perfectly. And I've been saying this for a very long time. They will continually increase the amount and the devastation of the false flags until they reach the doomsday one of the main cyber attack, which will take out the power grid, which will hit the banks, which will pretty much devastate the entire country, because without power, people will not be able to survive. Without power, riots happen. Without power, the president can declare martial law, and we can see all of this happen. And when he declares martial law and enacts his executive orders, he has the CISPA executive order and other executive orders that will allow him to take control of the internet. He wants to get the weapons from the American people, and he needs to have boots on the ground to control everyone, and he will be, and the government will be, the only source of information from what they are telling us, and no one will get any information from the internet at this point. And we can see that something like this could evolve if they do not get their way, because they will become desperate and they will do anything they possibly can to get control of the natural resources, to keep the dollar propped up as long as they possibly can, because they understand they are starting to lose control of the dollar, and they are just trying to get everything in order and get this war started so they can blame this on another country, because they believe when all this is all said and done that they will start this whole entire system again under their rule. And this is what they're trying to do. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.